We start?
No, just give me a minute. I'm starting this YouTube. Or should we start later? YouTube one.
No, start it. Start everything. It's okay.
Okay.
Just let us know when we're live.
Okay, live now.
Should I start?
Yep.
All right. Namaste, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Happy Earth Day. We are very pleased to be here today. I am Pushpita Prasad, and I'm very excited to welcome you here on behalf of the Coalition of Hindus of North America, CoHNA. I hope you're all familiar with us, but for those of you who are not, I'll start with a quick introduction. So, the Coalition of Hindus of North America is a registered nonprofit, and our focus is advocating and educating about Hindu traditions, deities, beliefs, and making sure that we have an adequate voice in the United States and Canada. And that involves working with all levels of lawmakers, working with different types of educational institutions, and working with our community to help them understand the deep richness, diversity, and depth of Sanatana Dharma and the broader dharmic ecosystem. And that is why we chose to try and do this webinar today with Professor Pankaj Jain, who is a renowned expert in this topic, because Earth Day and environmentalism has become very popular and very trendy. But for the other adherents of the dharmic traditions, it has always been a part of our life. It isn't an add-on. It was something very integrated, and I think we're going to have a lot of interesting content that walks us through some of that. So let us welcome Professor Pankaj Jain, who is an internationally renowned academic leader in sustainability, Jain studies, film studies, and diaspora studies. That is a fascinating mix of specialities. He is the head of the Department of Humanities and Language and the chair of the India Center at Flame University. Earlier, Dr. Jain was the founding co-chair of the India Initiatives Group and an associate professor in the departments of philosophy, religion, and anthropology at the University of North Texas at Tier 1 American University. Dr. Jain is a prolific author and writer. He has published several books and is currently working on another one. His books, again, I would love for everyone to check them out. But they have a wonderful mix of, touching on diasporic issues, dharmic ecology issues, and it brings this very holistic perspective. And I think in some way his work sort of exemplifies the reach and the diversity and the depth of the topic that we're going to talk about today. He has also published and being quoted in many media and academic articles, as well as as well as National Geographic series, and it's NBC, BBC, all of these talk where they talk about different kinds of ecological issues. And I think we're looking forward to learning more from him. So without further ado, Dr. Jain, I'll hand it over to you. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you, Pushpita. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you, CoHNA, for organizing this. What a great day, Earth Day. But for Hindus, every day, every morning reminds us of Bhumi Devi. When Hindus wake up in the morning, before they put their first leg on Mother Earth, they recite this verse: Samudra Vasane Devi, Parvatas Tana Mandale, Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam, Padas Parshang Kshamaswame. They're talking to Dharti Mata, Bhumi Devi, every morning. What are they saying? O Mother Earth, who you are cladded, your sky, your Samudra Vasane Devi. You're clad with the oceans. Oceans are your clothes. Samudra Vasane Devi, Parvatas Tana Mandale. You nourish us, you nurture us with mountains and rivers. Samudra Vasane Devi, Parvatas Tana Mandale. Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam. You are the consort of Lord Vishnu. So you are divine. Vishnu is obviously divine Hindu god and Hindu deity, and so Mother Earth is also divine. Padasparshan Kshamasur, because I'm touching you with my feet, please forgive me. So this is the feeling, this is the emotion, this is the reverence for Mother Earth for thousands of years that almost every Hindu wakes up to this awareness. So Mother Earth is nothing new for Hindus, like you were saying in the introduction. This has been part of the Hindu folklore, Hindu literature, Hindu reverence for thousands of years, right? Now
that's why we called out Bhudevi in the title of our.
Absolutely. So now let's go ahead and start my PowerPoint presentation, and I've shared my screen. I hope it's visible to everybody easily. So what I want to say is that dharma of sustainability, what can be the dharma of sustainability? And that equates with what is sustainability of dharma. If dharma can take care of sustainability issues, the reverse also happens, right? So if human dharma, if human actions can reflect in the sustainability of planet Earth, that applies back to human society also. So both are intertwined. And our ancestors understood that aspect for thousands of years earlier, when they recited, when they wrote and they composed and sang Rigveda verses such as Purush Sukta, in which, as they were doing rituals, as they were doing yajnas, not just for human affairs, but they were doing it to make sure that sun rises in the east at the right time, sun sets in the west at the right time, moon appears at the right time. So planetary motions, all the stars, the entire cosmos is interconnected with human actions. That was the idea, that interconnected, that's how the rituals were performed thousands of years back, as they were writing or composing Purush Sukta, as they were singing Purush Sukta, as they were offering soma to their yajnas. So that was happening again thousands of years back. So this is what dharma entails. Dharma literally simply means, dharma comes from the Sanskrit root dhri, which means to sustain. So dharma intrinsically itself includes the idea of sustenance and sustainability, which is what the title of my first book is, that came up more than 15 years ago, which the book is Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities. So dharma and ecology of Hindu communities, sustenance and sustainability. Dharma has this notion of sustaining, which is what I use in my title of my first book, which is what I quote even here in this title. All right, so that's my first book here, right here, Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities. Second book was kind of a sequel of that. So first book dealt with Swadhyay Parivar in Gujarat and Maharashtra, Bishnoi community in Rajasthan and Haryana, and Bhil community in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. Second book dealt with communities in Uttarakhand, an NGO called HESCO, and also Sikh community in Punjab. So those were the 5 communities that I covered in my first and second book. These are some of the pictures that I'm showing. This is the founder of Bishnoi community in 15th century desert of Rajasthan, Thar Registan or Thar desert, Guru Jambheshwar, the founder of Bishnoi community. This is the picture of Pandurang Shasi Athavale or Reverend Dadaji and his daughter Adarani Didiji. They are the founder and now the leader of Swadhyay Parivar, and it's still flourishing. What all they did, I will mention in the later part of this presentation. This is a little book picture. I hope you can see the people who hug the trees. This is a book written by Deborah Lee Rose, an American author, and the book is all about Bishnoi community. How this Bishnoi legendary tale of Amrita Devi, who sacrificed her life, more than 300 Bishnoi men, women, and children sacrificed their lives. That became a popular children's book in America. So across time, across space, Bishnoi legend, Bishnoi story has become very popular and has become more relevant now that we are facing these issues of climate change and loss of biodiversity and whatnot. So this is what is dharmic ecology. Dharmic ecology is, like I said in the beginning, how dharma is connected with ecology and what dharma can do for ecology and what it has been doing for thousands of years for ecology. That is what is dharmic ecology, which I deal with in my first and second book. Now, before that, I would also like to caution us that we are living in a globalized world where Western theorists, Western scholars have impacted our thinking, our writing, our speaking for now at least 200 years, right? So what Professor Susan Rudolph in 2005 called this imperialism of land has happened for in an entire planet or an entire Earth. But more than imperialism of land or imperialism of people, there is imperialism of categories. What is that? this is where the European scholars came up with these heavy categories such as this. I present here 3 examples. So Max Weber, founder of sociology, he called West as agentic, East as fatalist. East can only worry about fate. East cannot take agency in its own hands and carve out its own future. So it's always dependent on fate. That was Max Weber. Talcott Parsons called West, you get status by achievement. In East, you get status by birth. Heavy stereotypes, heavy biases you see in these kind of categories. John Stuart Mill said, West is a mature civilization, East is a childlike civilization. And that influenced countless scholars working in Europe and even in the US and even today probably. So these are the 3 examples how this imperialism catches us even today off guard, right? So how this imperialism even continues even in the environmental studies. So let me give you 2 examples. First, where this imperialism is heavily loaded here. So I show you this environmental performance index from 2018 that was done by World Economic Forum. And that counts India, that keeps India at 177 rank, one of the lowest environmentally performing countries in the world. So this is what I would call as imperialism of category, because the category is framed by the Western countries, Western NGO or whatever, and that judges a so-called third world country as India with majority of Hindus and calls it extremely poorly performing country in terms of environmentalism. Now, if we reverse the lens, which luckily happened also from an American NGO, American magazine called National Geographic, they came up with what they called as green index, right? In that green index, luckily, even though it was coming from the West, they called India as the greenest country in the world. Not for 1 year, 2 years, but 6 or 7, 8 years, they came out with these green indexes, and each time they counted India as the greenest country. Why? Because they counted the carbon footprint that happens with meat consumption in each country. They found that Indians continue to eat, one of the least consumption of meat is in India. For majority of Hindus, because of their cultural traditions, meat consumption remains very low. So because of vegetarianism, carbon footprint remains very low. So that's a feature of Dharmic ecology in my humble perspective. Second, look at this car density. This is from 2009. Even as late as 2009, we find Indians have one of the least ownership of cars, even less than China, Indonesia, South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, Russia, and so on. So why this continued dependence on public transport? Why there is still not as much fascination with assumption that car ownership is must. 4 members in family, 4 cars in family. Why that fascination is still not existing in India? That minimalism aspect, which Jainism calls as aparigraha, something embedded in Dharmic ecology, that if you don't need it, don't keep it. You can still use walking or bicycling or public transport or carpooling or so on, but car ownership remains still low in India. That shows the simplistic living, minimalistic living that still happens among majority of Hindus across India and across the world. Now, going deeper into that green index that I mentioned from National Geographic. So from 2008 to 2014, they counted these 4 parameters, what kind of houses Indians have or Hindus have, majority of Hindus in India have. Houses still do not have 24/7 hot water running or centralized air conditioning or heating needs. Dwelling sizes are still low, still small, and 3 generations of families can still live under one roof. So because of those cultural habits or less needs or less dependence on luxuries, housing are still continue to have very less carbon footprint among majority of Hindus in India. Similarly, transportation, like I mentioned, car ownership rates are still low. Daily commutes are still manageable, and utilization of public transport remains heavy, especially in a city like Delhi. Food is the most significant aspect in this. Consumption of locally produced food remains very high in India. Relative consumption of bottled water remains very low in India. Meat consumption remains very low in India. Seafood consumption also remains very low in India with majority of Hindus. Consumer goods also remains much less compared to many other Western countries. So combined all of these together, Indians were counted as the greenest in the world. So this is what I would probably we can call as when you study a different country by not imposing your own category, by not doing imperialism of categories, you can still study a country without stereotypes and without biases. This can also be studied from a phrase that was coined in 70s and 80s, which was called as the Hindu rate of growth. What was that Hindu rate of growth? That time, India was not progressing as fast as some of the major Asian tiger economies, such as Singapore and Taiwan and so on. But today, if we apply that Hindu rate of growth in today's environment, we can say probably that even though India is progressing very fast economically, India's environmental carbon footprint remains much low. Per capita carbon footprint remains, even today, it remains much low compared to many other countries that I showed, that National Geographic showed, compared to China, Brazil, and many other countries, because of these culturally based habits of Indians or majority of Hindus that keeps the carbon footprint even today much less than many other countries. All right. Now, so what are those dharmic ecology principles? Let's dive even deeper now. So I want to now show the 10 eco-dharmic principles that are inspired by Hindu traditions, Hindu principles, Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. So first among those 10 principles is Panch Mahabhutas. Right? This word Panch is very interesting. Right? Panch, we all know, it means 5, but it's also in English when we use the word fruit punch. Right? Fruit punch is supposed to have 5 fruit juices, but usually we don't get, but it's still called as fruit punch, which means 5 fruit juices, 5 fruits. Right? So Panch Mahabhutas here means 5 Mahabhutas, 5 great elements. Right? So what is that 5 great elements? The earth, the wind, the fire, the water, and the space. So these 5 elements form the universe's interconnected foundation. They highlight that universe, the entire universe is interconnected because these 5 elements are interconnected. And not just outwardly, but even within our body, the senses and elements are all interconnected. So there is universe outside of us, but also there is a universe inside of us. So like the famous Purush Sutta in Rig Veda says that the entire universe was created when the Purusha's eyes were sacrificed and they became sun and moon. Purusha's breath was sacrificed and they became the wind, and so on. So the entire universe is imagined as a cosmic person. Similarly, human body is also imagined a kind of an ecosystem that involves, that incorporates all the universal elements, all the 5 elements. So inside of us and outside of us are all interconnected. So that was the first eco-dharmic principle. Second is Ishavasyam. Ishavasyam, of course, comes from the famous Ishopanishad, the very first line. And as Dr. Radhakrishnan and Gandhi said, if Hindus can remember their just one line of Ishavasya Upanishad, they will always remain devout Hindu, practitioner Hindu. What is that first line? Isha Vasyam idam sarvam yat kinchit jagatyan jagata tena tyaktena bhunjetha ma gridha kasyas vidhanam, which means the divinity is omnipresent in infinite forms, that this entire universe is an abode of divinity. The mountains, the rivers, the plants, the cattle, we say holy cow, but not just cow. Then the entire cattle species, the monkeys are part of our pantheon, Hindu pantheon, Hanumanji. The elephant, Ganesha, Ganpati is important part of Hindu pantheon, perhaps one of the most popular deities across the Hindu world. The reptiles, snakes are important part of Hindu pantheons. We have Nag Panchami and reptiles in the neck of Shiva, as we all know, and so on. So many, almost all Hindu gods and goddesses have some birds or some animals, even reptiles, as part of their being. This image that you see here, right here on this screen, on your top right corner, is of course from the Vishwarup Darshan from the Bhagavad Gita, where Yogeshwar Krishna shows his Vishwarup Darshan to Arjun and shows all the different universal beings, all the species in the universe, where Yogeshwar Krishna is present in various forms, in various species across the universe. So divinity is not just the monopoly of human beings, but divinity is in, like Vishnu's 10 incarnations also show us divinity, like Vishnu came as a fish, Vishnu came as a turtle, Vishnu came as a boar, and then half man and half lion. So several species he represents even in his 10 incarnations. So once again, divinity is present, omnipresent in almost all species, entire universe, not the monopoly of human beings, as in other religions where only humans are imagined with divine qualities, but not in Hinduism. So that's the second point. Panch Mahabhutas was first, Ishavasyam second. Third major idea, and fourth, dharma and karma. They are intertwined, of course, so I include them both together, third and fourth. So dharma as duty and virtue. Dharma literally simply means duty. Dharma also means virtue. So dharma is not just a theoretical idea where you study in the Bhagavad Gita or study in the Upanishads and forget about it. No, people still live and abide by dharmic ideas, dharmic principles. I show here an image of a Bishnoi woman who is nurturing her own child and a deer cub with equal love, equal compassion, equal nurture. So that is her idea of practicing dharma towards even animal species. And this is one of the award-winning pictures coming from Bishnoi community in Rajasthan. Karma as eco-impact. Karma is so in the image I show here, karma is if you dump it, you drink it. If you dump the garbage in river, it will haunt you back, and you will be forced to drink that water, if not now, if maybe later. So this cycle of karma is always coming back to us. So this interconnection of our actions towards nature, and how nature comes back at us. We are all seeing the impact of climate change across the world now. So no country is spared from all those impacts. So that is the karma, law of karma, which I show here with this image. You dump it, you drink it, and what goes around, of course, comes around. So that's dharma and karma. Next is fifth is again also interconnected, tantra and yoga. Right? Tantra and yoga. Tantra is a celebration of universal divine energy. Right? And yoga comes from the yuj Sanskrit root. Yuj means to yoke or to join. So tantra and yoga celebrate the body-earth connection, as we all know. And also the prerequisite of doing yoga is vegetarianism. Many times it's forgotten. Yoga is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the US. But a prerequisite of yoga is the yama and niyamas. Yama's first principle itself is vegetarianism. Vegetarianism, if we all practice, especially in the Western countries, it will really keep our carbon footprint low. And that is now shown by countless studies by United Nations and many other scientific studies that red meat consumption is one of the biggest reasons for climate change. So if somebody is interested in yoga or tantra, vegetarianism must be the prerequisite of practicing yoga, and that will in turn help the climate and the earth, because it will bring down the carbon footprint by really less or almost zero especially red meat consumption, because it's all interconnected. So tantra and yoga are also have this inherent or intrinsic eco-dharmic ideas. All right, next is ahimsa and sannyasa, also intertwined. These two principles are, right, because non-violence, as Jainism calls it, and even in the Mahabharata it's mentioned, ahimsa paramo dharma, which means non-violence is the ultimate dharma. Ahimsa to the earth improves one's karma, like I mentioned, vegetarianism also, but also in many other ways. If ahimsa is practiced towards the earth, it will really impact our karma, and it will keep our carbon footprint low, but also our karmic footprint low. Also, carbon footprint and karmic footprint, they are both intertwined. If our karmic footprint are low, our carbon footprint will also be low, and vice versa. Right? And similarly, sannyasa, which means renunciation, of course, it means fasting. It includes fasting, which means to consume less. It means limited consumption, which means less consumption of the resources coming from the planet Earth. It also has now it has also come to mean in the US, especially minimalism, which means less houses, smaller houses, less resources, less furniture, and so on. So minimalism was intrinsic to Indian culture, especially Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain culture, where people lived by minimalistic attitude towards Mother Nature, towards consumption. That is how what I mentioned in the beginning, the Hindu rate of growth has continued to keep the carbon footprint low, karmic footprint low also for thousands of years. Now, eighth point is Bhumi Devi, where celebration of Bhumi Devi, which I began with this presentation, I began with the famous verse, famous shloka, where Bhumi Devi is revered. Bhumi Devi is also revered when, especially Hindu women across India, across the Hindu world, when they're drawing these columns, these rangolis, especially in the South India, but also in Maharashtra and even in North India, they draw these beautiful structures, beautiful mandalas, beautiful designs outside of their houses to celebrate Mother Earth, but also to celebrate the temporariness of our existence. So these designs are made, but these designs are temporary, so they are redesigned every day, and especially on special occasions or special festivals. And the shloka that I mentioned, Samudra Vasthi Devi in the beginning. So interconnected as, the latest count of so this is about the reincarnation idea, the 9th point here, right? Reincarnation or Punarjanam. So Punarjanam says that human body can be reborn in any other species until it gets moksha, until it achieves moksha, right? So how many species? So Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism imagine 8.4 million species a soul can traverse until it reaches moksha. And latest science is very close to that number. Now science says 8.7 million species. Now who knows which is correct, but they are very close. Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and latest science count of the number of species is very close. What it says, the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain idea, is that all these species are interconnected. So the reincarnation also highlights the interconnection of all species. It is not just about humans, but the entire cosmic cycle of reincarnation is interconnected also. Then, so this interconnection is also celebrated by Shraddh. Shraddh is the homage to ancestors, in which we feed to animals, we feed to Brahmins, and the idea is by feeding to Brahmins or by feeding to even to animals, our food or our respect to our ancestors will reach its proper destination. Our ancestors might be in any species, but because we are taking care of animals or any other species, we are also paying our respect to our ancestors. So that's again highlight of this interconnectedness across this reincarnation cycle. Finally, many of these principles were manifested in the life of Mahatma Gandhi. The way he lived his life was itself can be seen as an ecosystem of sustainability. His simplicity was manifested when he took this small meal of fruits and nuts, no egg, no meat, no seafood. His self-reliance was manifested when he made his own clothes, right? And without depending on this corporate cloth that was coming from the UK. His abhorrence for waste was manifested when he was upset with his own son, when his son loses a piece of pencil. So why waste even a piece of pencil? Like a Jain monk, like a Hindu monk, he used to walk every day. His walking itself was kind of a meditation. So less dependence on fossil fuel-based resources, right? And of course, ahimsa, non-violence towards the entire planet was a hallmark for his freedom struggle against the British, and that became the hallmark for civil rights movement by Dr. Martin Luther King and by Nelson Mandela's fight for racism and apartheid in South Africa, as we know. So Gandhi exemplified many of the eco-dharmic principles that later influenced Dr. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela and many other social and political leaders across the world. And yeah, so now I can show some more examples that I hinted in the beginning. Bishnois are one of the most powerful examples. We have this word, when I used to teach these subjects in the US, I used to mention the word tree hugger, and that would instantly bring about some chuckle in my students. So tree hugger is kind of a stereotype in the US. But tree hugging is a very serious practice by Bishnois. More than 2 centuries ago, Bishnois actually hugged a tree, Khejurli tree in Rajasthan, led by Amrita Devi. That tree hugging practice saved their Khejurli trees from the soldiers of nearby King Jodhpur, which I show here in this picture. And tree hugging became a very popular, very widespread practice in the Himalayas in 1970s. And that saved thousands of trees in the Himalayas. So tree hugging is a very serious business for Hindus by Bishnois and by Chipko movement in Uttarakhand. That time it was Uttar Pradesh in the Himalayas. So so I mentioned this history, contemporary applications by Chipko movement in 1970 especially. Then comes Swadhyay Parivar, which has built new sacred groves across Gujarat and Maharashtra, where the entire village comes together. They buy a piece of land and they offer their bhakti to trees and farms, and they raise these trees, they grow these trees, they do their farming, not for profit, but for reverence. So that's another great example of eco-dharmic principle, dharmic ecology as practiced by Swadhyay Parivar, for which they were given Templeton Prize in 1997, a bigger award than even Nobel Prize. And then after that, Magsaysay Award and Padma Vibhushan and many awards he had won. And he passed away in 2003. But yeah, after that, the work continues. Then sacred groves are also spread across India. Many states in India still have these forest fragments. They are communally protected. They have religious connotation, where hunting and logging is prohibited. And these are literally divine piece of land, and the trees are divine. There are temples inside, there are small shrines inside these forest fragments. I visited many of these sacred groves during my research for my first book, and these sacred groves are maintained by the Bhil communities across Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh that I visited, but they are also across India, in Kerala and many other parts of India. I also visited one sacred grove in near Shillong in Meghalaya, and many others, so many others. So what we can see from all these examples and theoretical points that I made is that what is moral in the Hindu world is also ecological in the Hindu world, and also that is dharmic in the Hindu world. How? This is what Professor Anne Gold noted when she was doing her research in Ajmer district in Rajasthan, that what she says is human behavior is irrevocably interwoven with the natural environment's condition. The deterioration of one implies and involves the other. If trees are being cut in a village in any part in India, the implication is that humans are also becoming greedy. So that gets reflected in the destruction of nature. So both are intertwined, right? So what Merritt and Indian and Appadurai and Smith, Frederick Smith, they say that there is no distinction between mind or body, culture or nature. The difference is of degree, not of kind. So all these are intertwined, interconnected. If humans are behaving morally, ecology will take care of itself. And that is what is eco-dharmic principle. So that is what they show in their work also. So in my work, I show that if dharma of humans can be inspired by dharma of nature, that will automatically, implicitly gets reflected in eco-dharma, which is what I show by the examples of Bishnois, Swadhyais, and Bhils in my first book. Right? And so that is what also is shown by Parajuli in 2001. The dharma is at the intersection of supernatural realm, that is spiritual realm, natural realm, that is ecological realm, and human realm, that is moral realm. If you take the intersection of all three, that is dharma. Dharma can take care of all these three realms. Similarly, even in our common Indian languages, not just Sanskrit, but not just Hindi, but in Marathi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Bengali, Odia, all the languages of India have this word dharma. And almost all these languages use dharma. Speakers of these languages use dharma not just for religion, but they also use dharma for physical characteristics. They use dharma also for morality. So once again, dharma is at the intersection of ecology, morality, and spirituality, of course. So that's what was shown by Waitman and Pandey in 1978. They did a linguistic survey of people of different languages of India. They found that dharma is a very widespread word, and that is used by many languages of India. Those are some of the conclusions, and yeah, that's what is all. I mean, I can go into many more details depending on the questions, but I think we can take a pause here and maybe take some questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think each thing could be a multi-day seminar in itself.
Yes.
This is just like, a reminder and a sprinkling of, it's such a deep area. You have obviously made a career out of it, and many folks could do that. But I think there was so much to talk about, but a few things that jumped out to me. And also, just before I go that into a logistical point, folks who want, please send in your questions on the Q&A, and we will try to get through them. But we had got some questions even before, and I think your slides reinforced that for me. You talked a lot about, and something that's topical, this concept of indexes, right? You talked about the environment, the EPI index versus the green index, and how when we look at these, and certainly, sustainability has become a big issue in the West, and there is now ESG investing and ESG indexes, which is one of the factors they talk about. But it's how you measure it. What are you measuring? Your index is a wonderful example of how just changing like what you measure can flip the results so drastically. But there was an anecdote that I just wanted to share here and see what you think of it. Is a colleague of mine, I live in Silicon Valley, where all the companies here push sustainability a lot. And I think they were trying to do a quiz for their employees about your climate change impact index kind of thing, like your personal footprint, carbon footprint. And my friend was a little upset. She's like, all the Indians in the thing came out a little bad because we take all these flights to India. I said, sure, that's fair enough. But did they ask you about vegetarianism or consumption of, red meat? And she's like, no, that wasn't there. I'm like, go back and tell your groups to fix that. because yes, we may be taking flights to India to go visit family, but how many of us are eating red meat? I'm not vegetarian myself, so but I'm just saying that, in terms of the consumption, how much of that is like, that's a good point. So I think you talked about the indexes at the international level, but this stuff flows all through our life, into like a school project or something that your company is measuring. So what would you say how can people become more aware of that and try to get education for people to become more holistic?
Yeah, I think by discussing these topics in such forums, right? And there's so much literature now on Hinduism and ecology. If we just Google or Jainism and ecology, Buddhism and ecology, there are a series of conferences that had happened more than 30 years back at Harvard, and there's a lot of literature, and I have done a little bit of my part also in adding on to that literature. So by, I think, more research and more awareness that not just, let's not just take anything on face value, right? Let's critically examine, whatever I'm saying or whatever anybody is saying has to be critically examined. And, there must be an alternative perspective to anything that we say. By those critical examination, I think we can really challenge what is coming through media, through New York Times, or through Washington Post, or through any forum. And then we can, I think, really do some service to ourselves, to our children, to our heritage, to our culture, and so on. Right?
So,
Dr. Jain, you want to stop sharing the slides? Then we can.
Sure. Yes.
Wonderful. The other aspect I wanted to touch on was you talked about the Bishnoi community, and I think certainly they are inspirational. The original tree hugger and
Yes.
the Chipko movement. But what do you think is the impact of dharmic ecology in terms of the like, we looked at examples, but even today I read recently, we all saw the news, right, that cheetahs have been reintroduced
Yes.
in the
Yes.
Indian subcontinent, and Project Tiger has become a success. India still, the rhinos are recovering, but when I think of all this, it's great that it's recovering, but I look at it, and we live in the United States, there are people here from Europe. I often wonder that the earth could not have been designed in a way that only Indian subcontinent and Africa were born with biodiversity, right? Obviously, the world
Yes.
began with biodiversity, and there are only a few pockets of the world where it still remains. So I would love for your thoughts on what exactly happened. Why is it that the Indian subcontinent, Bharat, which has been a very heavily populated part of the world through history, so this was not like some place where humans didn't really want to live, right? It's been a center of human civilization for
Yes.
as old as recorded history. So despite that, why is it that so much biodiversity, flora, fauna, survived, and today we can rescue it? Well, we can rescue it, obviously it means that it's there, right? I don't think
Yes.
anybody can talk about if I don't know if Europe ever had tigers, for example, but it would be hard to think of reintroducing it because the landscape has changed so drastically. Same for America, so just.
Yes. That's a great question. And fortunately, I've traveled, and I'm still traveling for the last 25 years, every corner of India. And when I go to, let's say, National Park of Gir, where lions are present outside Africa, only in India, only in Gujarat, only in Gir and surrounding areas. What is the secret, like you're asking? And one big difference comparing America, United States, and India is, in United States, they started this movement of creating national parks, right? National parks. So many national parks, Yosemite and Yellowstone and so on and on. But those national parks were created at the cost of humans. All the humans were driven out of the national parks. Humans cannot be part of the national park because those are the sacred, pristine pieces of land without humans. But in India, imagine, no piece of land can be without humans. Yet we have such great, rich biodiversity, including lions, including rhinoceros, including tigers, including now cheetah also, and leopards, and so on and so forth. So many wild beasts. And Sundarbans is another great example, and Gir also. Because these pieces of land, these national parks, these forests where we have so many wild beasts, are filled with humans. But humans will not kill tigers or lions. They are living happily ever after, happy coexistence. even if they become violent, even if tigers may be killing humans, but rivers may not still happen in Sundarbans, in Bengal, for example. There's a word in Bengali which is bon. Bon means forest. One becomes bon in Bengali. Bon bibi. Bon bibi means forest goddess or tree goddess. Forest goddess, yeah. Forest goddess means there is goddess in forest. So you cannot hurt or hunt any part of the forest because it's all divine. So tigers are also divine and so on. So tigers coexist in Sundarbans with humans. Lions coexist with humans in Gir, in Gujarat. So this coexistence is part of tribal communities or whatever communities that are living in those forests. This happy coexistence can happen because of this intrinsic idea of seeing divinity in every particle of the universe. Right? Bishnois similarly. Bishnois are vegetarians. But when, let's say, not all are vegetarians in India also, right? So there are hunters and poachers in India also. Salman Khan example. So when Salman Khan goes, Salman Khan, Saif Ali Khan, Taboo and Neelam, these 4 Hindi film stars were shooting for the film, not shooting, hunting, but shooting for a film called Hum Saath Saath Hain near Jodhpur. They wanted to do actual shooting, wildlife shooting. So they hire a jeep and they go and start hunting a black buck. They hunt, they shoot at a black buck deer near Jodhpur in a village called Kankani village near Jodhpur, between Jodhpur and Pali. The first people that rush to the spot are Bishnois. They catch Salman Khan, and Salman Khan is still facing that legal issue for now 3 decades. Right? So because of the communities such as Bishnois and even Jain community, because of the pure vegetarian idea in Jainism, because of the Jains' activism against meat consumption across India, across time and across space, for last 3 millennia, Jains and Buddhists and many Hindus have been very active in promoting vegetarianism and promoting Jeev Daya, compassion for all animals, compassion for all species, right? So all those ideas are so intrinsic in all our many of our communities that could be some of the reasons that you're asking why so much biodiversity we still have. We still have, even today, another example, if you go between Haridwar and Rishikesh, there is what is called as elephant corridor. What is elephant corridor? Those are national highways, but you cannot honk at animals. You're not supposed to honk at animals. You're supposed to wait for elephants, because highways are not the monopoly of humans. Land belongs to animals first, then to humans. So national highways have complete freedom for wildlife to walk across. Now come to US. In humans, on national highways in US, even humans cannot walk. If pedestrians are seen on national highways in the US, they can be fined, they can be put in jail. Look at the contrast of the culture. Humans not allowed on national highways in the US, wildlife allowed on national highways in India. That summarizes, I think, everything. That is the level of patience, level of acceptance, level of celebration of wildlife, flora and fauna among humans, among Hindus, among humans for thousands of years. गाय चल रही है सड़क पे तो जल्दी किस बात की, रुको गाय को चलने दो. What's the hurry? जाना कहाँ है, पहुंचना है. That is some of the ideas. So those are some of the ideas that, in my opinion.
I think, like you said, the intrinsic veneration for everything, and India has changed, is changing a lot. But but I think if you look at traditionally, you will see that there wasn't this desire to, or there wasn't a directive to remake your environment. Like there wasn't a God-given grant. Like
that's a very important term. Sorry, can I add? There is a word called terraforming, because you're defining that. So let me add the word also. What you're saying, Pushpita, is terraforming. Terra means land. Forming is reshaping, right? So terraforming was done by early Europeans when they came to US. They wanted to create an ideal land, kingdom of heaven, in the image of Europe. In the Europe, it's all dry land, no wildlife and so on. So they removed all the thousands of Native Americans, and all kinds of these trees were all cleared away in North America also, because they were doing terraforming. Okay, sorry, that's what this one to add.
Thank you for bringing
that. That's what happened in the US. Yes. Terraforming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. So taking forward this idea of contrast in between the approach of indigenous communities, which is more personal, to the if we oftentimes we hear about Western science taking this data-driven measurement approach, and even though the approach to putting the conclusions which indigenous communities have, which are defined as traditions and not science, even though the methodologies are same. They also went through the same systems of analyzing and testing their hypothesis and perfecting it over generations. That body of wisdom is labeled indigenous wisdom, while this scientific approach has been about data driven, measurement driven, which relies on capitalist systems. And
Yes.
and that's another way reflection of the contrast in the approach. Even though indigenous systems is personal, and this scientific approach of conservationist, like we talk about, like conservational land is different, and then there are lands where you can make your own way, where no animal exists, forgetting that they are all one and ecologies are interdependent. So oftentimes this talked about like, oh, indigenous approaches should be taken for the science, like Western indigenous wisdom should come together with the Western science.
Yes.
Is it even possible because of these inherently different ideas and altogether?
I think, see, the indigenous approaches can really help shape our or reshape or change our habits, right? See, science alone cannot. Probably science can help by counting the carbon footprint coming out of red meat consumption, like I said in my presentation, right? But to really reshape those habits, that's where I think indigenous approaches can help in promoting more vegetarianism, for example, right? So science can be a top-down approach, right? And traditional ecological knowledge can be bottoms-up approach, right? Grassroots approach, right? Changing behavior, changing habits from grassroots. Let's find alternative cuisines of our food. If we can reshape, change our habits, change our food, that is one big contribution we all can make towards less climate change, less carbon footprint. Right? We means I'm speaking of the entire humanity here. Right? If humanity can learn from, let's say, Hindu cuisines or Indian cuisines, right? Or vegan cuisines across the world, wherever it's coming from, Japan, China, wherever, right? But India has been the pioneer and the largest, longest, oldest practitioner of vegetarianism, right? Even those who are eating meat, let's say in India, they are not eating 3 times a day red meat. They may be taking, maybe some chicken piece or whatever, some chicken dish, maybe once a day at the most, or in some cases maybe once a week. Alternately, it's very less consumption of meat, even by so-called non-vegetarians in India or among the Hindu world. Compare that to the US or Germany, where you need pork in the breakfast, beef in lunch, maybe another meat dish in dinner, isn't it? I hope I'm not exaggerating, but that is what
No,
my
you're not.
observation is.
You're not. I've seen this.
Right? So I think, I mean, we don't have to be against science. So science can help us in giving us more long-lasting, for example, solar panels, so we can cut down on fossil fuel, right? And we can have more solar panels. Science maybe can give us even better wind turbines, so we can use more wind energy and less fossil fuel, right? So we need science also. We need science and technology also. But our habits, for example, our food especially, I think that's where I think we need traditional ecological knowledge. We need habits such as vegetarianism and so on. I hope that helps.
So
And even
another
farming.
question.
Actually, farming is another example. Sorry. In farming, right? Science is telling us that pesticides and chemical fertilizers are extremely disastrous for our health and for planet's health, right? But traditional farming was always organic, was always diverse. When I went to Uttarakhand, or even in Rajasthan, in one small piece of farm, there's very small farms in India, right? They're not large farms like in US. We're all monoculture in US, right? But in India, they will grow some arhar ki dal, some urad ki dal, some chane ki dal, some gehu, some chiku, some aam, so many fruits and plants all in one farm. Talk about diversity. mind-blowing diversity of humans, of languages, of flora and fauna, and even in agriculture. That is why this culture, this ecology, what Pushpita was asking, it has survived for thousands of years because of this diversity. It is not monoculture. It has so many elements, even in food, even in agriculture, even in flora and fauna. That is, but that diversity is the hallmark of our survival, of our long sustainability.
Yeah, I think like I said, there's so much to talk about because you talked about minimalism and reuse, and we all there are many people
That's
who
all culture.
specialize. Yeah, there are many people who specialize in traditional housing, how it was adapted to environments. All of that has an impact on environment, right? Because now we live in modern concrete boxes. You need to spend power to build it, then you need to spend power to cool it or heat it.
You keep inspiring me to interrupt you, sorry. Because I just returned from Kutch. Kutch mein, when the earthquake came, one of the most devastating earthquakes in India was in Kutch in 2001. I took 12 students from my university. My campus is right behind you, right behind me, the Flame University campus in Pune. We have a Discover India project, Discover India program. Every student must go to Discover India, and the faculty goes with them. So I took 12 students to Kutch. In Kutch, what we saw in 2001 in that deadly earthquake, all the so-called modern and scientific houses were all razed to dust. But the traditional bhungas, those are the cylindrical houses. They could not be touched even by the earthquake.
Wow.
You just touched upon that, so it reminded me of that example.
Yeah.
Bhungas survived. So now government and scientists are also promoting bhungas, cylindrical houses. Cylinder supports itself. It won't be destroyed even by earthquake. So I thought I'll interrupt you and you mentioned that example.
No. I think it just strikes me because I think there's so much change in the world that we even in the past 200 years there's been so much change that we kind of forget what even like we talk about the tribes, but that's mostly because they were isolated. If you look at descriptions of traditional living even in Asian cities, I don't think it was that different. The tribes have just hung on to it longer. Their modernity is slower to reach them. But like we talked about the housing, even the clothing, right? I mean, the clothing was adapted to the environment. So in the West, there's a lot of conflict, right, between air conditioning temperatures, and women and even men have conflicts on, hey, it's too cold, it's too hot. And part of that is linked. I read a very interesting study that AC temperatures were calibrated in the 60s, and at that time it was a very male dominated office and everyone was wearing suits. So now you come,
I did know this on
using the same, you're using the same standard now, and the clothing is completely different. So you think about the green impact, like these massive hot parts of the world, we've built concrete boxes, we show up in suits, and then we have
I have no idea the gender issues are involved in air conditioning also.
Oh yeah, there was because it's a very common conflict in offices with, like, the women feeling more cold and men feeling less. There's a fight over the thermostat.
Wow.
Is it too cold or is it not? So there was this whole study and it came in the New York Times and other places. So it was interesting. So I think that holistic living that we were talking about, it's hard to understand its impact till it falls apart, because it's everything from the housing, the clothing, it's a lifestyle, and I think
so many
which Pushpita ji, you also talked about gender issues, so it actually make me to think about the feminist movement in Western society, which actually says that essentially the men are destructors of the environment, completely excluding the indigenous experiences and non-Western perspective, where with the shared values of
very good
protecting.
point, yes.
I
So
had not heard of that.
another contrast.
Good point.
Okay, I had not
And
heard of
that
that.
coming from the like who can be mother of the feminist movement, if I could say that, from Sita Mata's kitchen to the Vishnoi communities, like
yes.
those are not eco-feminist.
And to contemporary leaders such as Vishnu Lady Amrita Devi and Gaura Devi in Chipko movement, Vandana Shiva in Uttarakhand even today, and so many more.
So I think we're coming up to the hour. I just wanted to check if there were, and I think we had a few more questions, but I think we touched on most of the points. So if anybody has any last questions, please put them in. We'll take a look. But I just, I know before we started, we were having that super interesting discussion because one of your areas of study is also films, right? Films and diaspora studies. So I just wanted to bring that in as a last question is,
Yes.
how have you seen this concept of sustainability, environmentalism play out in popular culture, and obviously films being the most visible part of popular culture these days. Kantara
Yes.
became a super hit, a sleeper hit this past year, and I
Yes.
think was fascinating. I think there were two people who liked Kantara, right? One are the people from the region who could see themselves reflected in it, but I think there was also people like me. I'm from the north, and it was a fascinating insight into what our world used to be and could be.
Right.
So I would love to hear your thoughts on just how you've seen this play out in films.
Yes. Yes. So actually, this there was a recent book by Amitav Ghosh, and in which he argues that uh, fiction can do a better job in connecting environmental efforts and human behavioral changes. Fiction can be very non-rational, let's not say irrational, but it can come up with non-rational explanations and connections, right? Even divine connection and so on. So something he was arguing. So that inspired me to look for films, because films is one of my study areas also. And I was so surprised, pleasantly surprised, that Indian films have a tradition of almost more than 80 years, almost 100 years of showing environmental issues in so many dozens and dozens of films. When Kadvi Hawa came in Hindi, Kadvi Hawa means dark wind, it came like about 5 years back. Everybody started hailing that film as the first climate change film in Hindi. And when I started studying, I thought climate and environmental issues have been part of the Indian film for almost 100 years, starting from Dharti Ke Lal, starting from Nicha Nagar. Nicha Nagar is a film in which chemical pollution is shown and how it is impacting human society. Dharti Ke Lal shows climate change and poverty and famine and so on. And there's so many other. Animals are part of the Hindi film and Indian films for such a long time. Similarly, natural disasters are shown in many Indian films for such a long time. So it's a comprehensive study of all the films in India, almost all films in India, which are dealing with environmental issues, climate issues, animal issues, food issues, dam and what it does to terraforming that we were touching upon a little bit in the beginning. So all those issues have been dealt with in our films, and that is part of my latest article that was just published last month. And you can easily Google for it, climate change, Pankaj Jain, PDF article you can find online.
Yeah.
So that is that article. Then and so many other. I also studied the Bengali films by Shyam Benegal and Satyajit Ray and Mrinal Sen and Ritvik Ghatak. How their films can also be studied from environmental lens. So this is this is one of my study areas, to combine climate issues with film studies. So that is that. Yes.
I think there was a question. Your view on millets and its role in dharmic traditions and ecology. So I guess we're back to food now.
Oh, millet. Oh, yeah, of course. This 2023 is the International Year of Millet. India is the biggest producer and consumer of millet for thousands of years. What is millet? Millet is bajra, jowar, jaw. Anything that is not gehu or chawal broadly can be called as millet, I think. Especially bajra and jowar and jaw. We should eat more bajra, more jowar, jaw. It is healthier for us. It is healthier for our planet, because millet has not been as polluted and corrupted by chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides as much as rice and wheat. So millet, we have to promote at every level within our family and beyond. So United Nations has taken this idea and declared 2023 as the year of millet.
Yeah,
so eat more bajra, eat more jowar and jaw.
I just hope that the societies that nurtured this get their due recognition. We've unfortunately seen a lot of good ideas from different parts of the world go international, but usually stripped from their cultural roots.
Yeah, we don't know millet. We don't combine with India. India is millet. Millet is India.
Right. And I think there was a request, a question, or sort of comment is that, this is a great presentation. Can we simplify it to educate middle school kids? And yes, I think I'll just take a minute to take this question. And that's exactly what we were trying to do through the talk today, because Dr. Jain is a scholar that one could do like a multi-day conference on even one of these things, which of course is not going to be very interesting to middle school kids or frankly to a lot of adults too. So it was our humble attempt today to sort of give people a sprinkling of what is there. But I think one of
Most
our other
people.
goals is to really sort of motivate people to go and take this and take it in their own, to adapt it to their channels, to their medium, to their tools, and take it to the audiences or stakeholders that they work with, whether that's corporate ESG departments, your middle school kids, college kids, whatever, because there is so much, and maybe to inspire them to sort of become the new dharmic ecology warriors, because I think climate change is one of the burning issues of the day. It is especially for the for the younger generation that is going to bear the brunt of it. It is something that they're so concerned about, and I think it would be wonderful for people to realize that there are many answers that can be found, including in some very in the dharmic philosophies, the dharmic ecosystems, which have lived in a very sustainable way, without honestly sacrificing a lot of standard of living, because I think a lot of times people feel that it leads to deprivation. I mean, sure, by maybe the way we live our modern lifestyle, but again, India was known as a center of civilization. It was not a center of deprivation. So, the world came to India because it was advanced in trade and manufacturing and luxury goods. It didn't come to save poor people. I always like to remind people that, European colonization, they didn't come to help us learn English, build railways, or, but, they came to get rich. They came to
Yes.
get rid of the land, and so there was a way. There were systems in the world that had figured out a way to have the creature comforts, to develop economically, but do it in a way that was sustainable and respectful of the environment. So I would encourage everyone to get engaged with organizations like ours, because that is like what we try to do is take this traditional knowledge that is in the danger of getting siloed as and that's the biggest mistake we will make, is if we box it off as something that's we go study in our temples, or we think about it once a month or once a year on Earth Day, or maybe some of us will go become environmental majors. No, I think the inspiration is for all of us to remember this can be part of our lives in big or small ways, and I think organizations like CoHNA can play a role in there.
In the chat, Dr. Jan has put forward the link for his all the papers if somebody wants to
Yeah.
read. But I also would like to encourage everyone to please essentially buy. This is one of the essential buys. His book on Dharma in America, Dr. Jan's book. It's an essential read for teenagers, for young people, for children to learn about Hinduism and Jainism, the history, and how it has contributed in America. And also, if you are interested in this topic, Dharma and Ecology of Hindu Communities is another of his book, and many more like that. Dr. Jain, would you like to add some of the books you would like to?
Then Amazon, just type my name, Pankaj Jain, or just Google Pankaj Jain books, you'll find books. Yes. Easily.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I think I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you very much for making time to talk to us today on this wonderful Earth Day. And I hope we have sparked some curiosity and conversations, and we would love to have you back. There's so much to discuss there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thank you
everybody.
for organizing this. Such an important topic. And really, thank you. And keep
Yes,
doing the
and
great. Really appreciate
thank you
all the
so
work.
much. Thank you so much. And this will be available on our YouTube channel. Folks were asking if it's recorded. It has been. And it will be available on our YouTube channel, which is at CoHNA Official. Please go to it. You can also check out our website, kohna.org, CoHNA.org. And as always, please support our work and please share the word. Thank you so much. Namaste, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. Thank you, everyone. So I have stopped sharing on
Okay.
the YouTube.